Hey guys, Mike T here with Princess Auto. Welcome to Tech Tips with Mike T. We're talking about snowblower maintenance. So whether you're just pulling your snowblower out or you're going to put it away for the season, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things to just look at, inspect, maybe fix, replace, and we're going to kind of just do a brief overview. So depending on the model that you have, of course, if you've got an electric unit, well, there's a little bit less to do maintenance on. But when it comes to a unit like this with a gas engine, a lot of different controls, electric start, a large auger, we're going to kind of piece this bit by bit and go through some of that standard maintenance. So of course, you always want to make sure that you're looking at your fuel. So if you're storing for the season or opening it up for the season, you want to make sure that your fuel system is proper. So if you're storing it, you wanted to make sure that you stored it properly with using fuel stabilizer, or in this case, Seafoam. Seafoam's a great product to stabilize fuel for the season, but also to run it throughout all of the season so that it helps create a really solid fuel system through your gas engine. So a little bit of Seafoam in prior to stopping for the season in the spring. If you're that person that likes to leave fuel in your unit, that's what you need to add, fuel stabilizer or Seafoam in this case. If you prefer to drain out all of the fuel, you'll want to run that engine dry, possibly open up the fuel bowl and drain that out. A little bit more work, but some people like to run them dry. Some people like to leave the fluids in it. So Seafoam's a great option. Pour a little bit more than what you would normally use if you were mixing it in your jerry can, and run that system for a few minutes so that that Seafoam can go through all of the fuel connecting parts, the fuel filter if it has, the fuel bowl in the carburetor, as well as the fuel lines. So that way you don't run any risk of poor fuel quality sitting somewhere, and it also lubricates your fuel system. So that's probably key. Most snowblowers that have issues in the spring or getting going in the fall is mostly due to poor fuel quality. You'll want to do regular oil changes. So whether you're doing little bits here and there, you may want to change it once a season, twice a season, depending on the hours that you're putting it on. I would typically, suggest around 200 hours of running, change that oil out. If it's brand new, you want to change that oil out about 6 to 8 hours after that, first startup. That way you kind of remove any of the the build, all of the particles that can accumulate during a brand new engine break-in. So in some cases, they're really accessible. So down below here, if we bend down, way down here is our oil drain plug on this model. Some have a little port that you have to get a socket in. It just depends on your engine style. Basically down below here, we would just take a socket or a wrench, open up, capture that oil. Always check with your manufacturer's suggested oil, 5W, 10W. Every engine's slightly different. Also the temperature ranges that you may be using your snowblower in. Obviously it's going to be below 0 for the most part, but you want to get oil that can actually run through the engine as those temperatures drop. So a good oil, just check with your manual. When it comes to maintenance on the rest of it, obviously you have a spark plug if it's a gas engine, so you're going to want to check your spark plug. If you have troubles getting it going, that could also lead towards that poor fuel entering that piston chamber. Spark plug might give you some issues. A couple $1 spark plug can cause a ton of headaches. Just get a new spark plug. I suggest once a year replacing it, or just checking it in that following season. When it comes to the mechanical side, so a lot of these units have a lot of handles that are moving. Quite often they're attached to cabling. So you can see here our handle that adjusts the up down on the chute has cables. They are within a shield, but sometimes they do corrode. If you've brought it in, brought it out, things do rust, seize up. So it's a good idea to check your cables, make sure that you didn't catch them on something as you're snow blowing, and make sure that they are under the right tension. So there are some settings on there, basically some nuts that come up inside, and you can adjust them. So if you're not really getting that full throw, you can adjust them accordingly so that they are a little bit more snappy when you're operating them. Anytime you have a connection, so on the chute on this side, it's got a nut so that we can adjust the tension on it. You want to just give that a quick spray with some lubricant. That way, things work when you need them to work. A common area that kind of gets worn fairly quick is underneath this cap here in this model. If we were to remove this cap, there's a bar that comes in with a cotter pin or a linch pin, depending on what your model has. And there's usually a gear inside here. And over time, as we constantly rotate the chute back and forth, we're going to get some wear and tear. It's a good idea to every now and again. Some are a little bit more exposed than others. In this case, you do have to kind of remove that. And I would definitely lubricate that with some low temperature type grease. Lithium works really well. That way that stays lubricated. If you've got a metal chute system, that will be metal on metal, and we want to prevent any kind of grinding or chipping of the metals. So lubricate that up. You may have to inspect underneath your controls. There might be little linkages that vibration happens. They may fall out, and next thing you know, something's not controlling right. Maybe putting it into gear may give you an issue. Speaking of gears, this does have a gearbox. This unit has a variable speed gearbox, forward and reverse. You, over time, will have to do some maintenance within that gearbox, but that's not just a couple of hour go over your machine. That's basically a tear down, and you will have to either A, if you're knowledgeable, attempt that yourself, but B, maybe take that into a service depot to kind of have a look at your gearbox to change the gear oils. That's a little bit more intricate than just doing a slight oil change. When it comes to the belt side, so many of these are belt driven. So we have a couple of different styles of belts that are available as accessories, replacement units. You do need to know the numbers of your belts. And basically, you'll find the numbers on the edge of your belt or on a card, and quite often there's a reference. A lot of these are kind of cross-breed type belts. So, in this case, this one's good for yardmen, yard machines, Husky, and Bolins. So Troy-Bilt, MTD. So there's a lot of belts that are similar. You just got to find the right size ones. As you can see, these are slightly different in size. And where do you find them? Well, down below here, you got to take the shrouds off typically. Down in here is where your pulleys and your belt kits will be attaching to your auger flights. Obviously, if you've got a unit that has tires, so you're going to have to make sure that your tire pressure is right. Some units have a cotter pin or a thread-on nut that holds your tire assemblies on, making sure that that's tight so vibration doesn't wiggle it loose. Some have an actual quick pin that you can remove, easy access. Just make sure that those are, filled up right, and, you do your maintenance. Lubricate a lot of these parts. What I like to do, and I've used this method in the past, is when it comes to the chute side. So in this case, this one's a plastic chute. Some chutes are metal, so wear and tear is different on these components. But quite often debris, heavy ice gets built up down into the chute, close down into where the auger flight comes in, your impeller blade. And that builds up and that builds up. So, during your usage, it's not only just a spring and summer, winter maintenance, it's during as well. So you want to make sure that these things are actually lubricated so they're working in those colds. So what you want to do is maybe add a material that helps prevent buildup. I've seen guys spray PAM, for cooking. Not the most ideal when it comes to industrial use, but something like a graphite dry spray would work really well. You just shoot it inside the chute down in the chamber here, and basically you'll prevent a barrier from the ice bonding to the plastic or the metal, and being graphite, very, very slippery. Just don't get it all over the steps, because you'll just take a slide straight down, but just spray a little bit inside, and that will help prevent a lot of that buildup. You can also spray it inside your auger flights. What you don't want to use is something that attracts dirt, grime, and holds onto. I would suggest not using the WD-40, only because that tends to want to grab a hold. It's great for removing stuff, but it's not the best for preventing a buildup. So I would use a graphite product that doesn't attract a lot of debris, gravel, rock, and will eliminate a lot of that attachment of that hard ice. So that's just a little tip as we go through this, and that can be done something during your season if you're bringing your unit inside, to thaw out. You want to make sure that anytime you're doing that, you're going to create condensation, rust, so you want to do a little bit more maintenance if you're able to bring it into warmth during your use of that season. All right, so we're going to turn it around and we're going to look at the auger side, and we'll go through some of the little tidbits of maintenance on that. All right, so now we're at the auger side, so, in tune with the maintenance. This is the dangerous side. So if you're, stopped for the season, you're preparing to, put it away, or you're just starting up, do a visual first. Something can have been wrapped around. If you got an extension cord that got stripped, and maybe you've got electric wires that are wrapped around, string, whatever it is that you may have pulled into your auger, you want to make sure that that's cleared out. Where you do have to be careful of is the tension that auger may be under. If something was to bind and you stick your hands directly in there, you want to make sure that that's freewheeling. You don't want to have that under tension and all of a sudden it kicks soon as when you let go of something that's been bound up in there and your hand's in there. You want to make sure that your hands are free from that. You can tilt the unit back and give it a turn, or use the recoil just to pull it over. You'll get something to spin. Make sure that it's not jammed. Once you're past that, just start having a look at your pins. So in different size width snowblowers, you may have different amounts of auger blades that will have shear pins. Now, shear pins come in a variety of different sizes. Basically, they are designed to break so you don't break the expensive components in your auger assembly, especially your gear assembly. So there's a bit of a kind of a splice cut out of them, and they will snap, especially if it gets jammed up. So you may not have noticed that had broken off, or it's basically not being held in there by its nut or a pin, and it could just be jammed in there. You'll want to inspect those to make sure that when you go to turn it on for the fall time, getting ready for winter, that you're good to go with your shear pins. Always have 2 or 3 packs of these on hand. They're cheap, and the last thing you want to do is in a snowstorm try to find some. You don't want to replace it just a quick replacement with a standard bolt, because that's when you may run into that issue. You might hit something and bind that up, and then your repairs are going to be costly, and your downtime. So just have a couple of packs of these. We sell them for different models. Again, they are slightly different, as you can see in these 2 units. One is more of a bolt style, one is more of a pin style. Just find the ones that you have, and basically just get a couple of packs. That way you've got them on hand. Also inside, you have a flight. That's kind of one of the stages of your blower. In this case, being a 2-stage. You want to inspect that. Some of them will have grease nipples that you can put a grease gun to. Some of them I've seen where the shafting actually has grease points. Just make sure that the bearings are greased properly and keep that grease, especially if you're bringing that unit inside and outside. You're thawing it or using it and then thawing it. That can start to create a little bit of moisture buildup, and you want to make sure that that's your your meat and potatoes of your system. If that seizes up, then you're going to have some costly downtime. So visually inspect it. Again, this is the area where I would kind of also suggest spraying in some graphite, dry graphite. That way it won't build up. It'll just kind of drop off. And again, where we talked about earlier in the chute here. And that will help prevent buildup. As for maintenance goes, you also want to check your stance and your footing on your intake here. So on the sides, each side, you're going to have a foot, and it's going to be adjustable. So depending on your surface that you're actually going to be snow blowing, if it's concrete like this or if it's gravel, you may want to adjust the height of the feet so that you're not digging down into that gravel. You may want to create a little bit of a layer to kind of get that gravel to sit down for the winter, and then just raise that auger up a little bit so that it's not grabbing that gravel. If you want to get it down to bare concrete, then you just have to adjust. There's usually just a couple bolts to loosen off, and then you adjust your height, but just try to keep it as level as possible. We also carry add-ons or replacements. In this case, the ones that are on this Remington are a metal foot. Some of the feet are very small, some of them are a little bit longer. And then this unit here, it's kind of a hardened reinforced fiberglass plastic. And it's also, you can see inside, you can adjust them by bolting these on. So these do wear out. That's the part that comes into contact with the surface. So over time, they either rust out or just get beat up, and this is a great, cheaper option when it comes to replacing those feet on those adjustable feet on the slides. Now, if you tend to go into deeper snow, so this isn't really a maintenance thing, but it's an add-on that a lot of snowblowers don't have, or it's an option kit for them. As snow gets higher and higher, and maybe you've got these big drifts, well, driving this into a drift, that can damage your chute, and really now you're starting to have to work that machine. We also carry basically slicers. They're drift cutters is what they're called. A drift cutter basically is attached to the side of each side of your auger housing. And you can set them, and what that'll do is as you go into your drift, this will actually cut that and chunk it out almost like you're kind of splitting up that snow as you're entering it. You can change the angle slightly, and that will allow you to kind of break up that drift and feed that into your snowblower. So it's a great option. Not all snowblowers have them, but they're definitely available as an accessory for these machines, and they're pretty quite universal. You'll see that if you do visit us in our stores, you can see that a lot of these snowblowers have the holes already there for them, whether or not they come with that kit or not. So another thing you want to consider as an accessory is a cover. So the cover, if you're going to store the snowblower outside, you can cover it up. There's a lot of different sizes available. It helps prevent any kind of sunlight coming into the plastics where they may start to get brittle. Things will snap eventually. It'll help protect the paint so that doesn't fade. And then any of the other components that don't really like to see that hot and cold weather. So by covering it, it's just going to prolong the life of your snowblower and basically prevent any kind of unwanted issues when it comes to storing it. Well, that's it for Tech Tips with Mike T. We'll see you next time.